Hello gainers, I'm Ralphie and welcome to my channel Fitter Philosophy, which is about the Stoic based sharing of my personal experience to help inform your personal experience so that it's better. There's nothing like people just chatting. You know, social media is fine, but just having a chat with folk and sharing a personal situation, because if we find ourselves in that situation, we can remember what another person said about their experiences, and it helps us move from the unknown to the known in any situation far more successfully and quicker. And generally we have a better experience in problem solving should we have a problem. And one of the problems of life is that occasionally we suddenly experience near death. And this video vlog is entitled "The Third and Fourth Time I Nearly Died." And I'm going to share what happened to me with you. So hopefully, you know, if you have one of these situations, and it's not unusual, I can tell you that, it really isn't unusual, then you've got the benefit of someone else's perspective. And I have already done a video here on the first and second time I nearly died, and to be honest, I omitted several instances in my childhood. One when I fell off a swing and missed a broken bottle going through my neck by about half an inch. Hey kids, you know. And the other time was when I was getting chased by a gang and I ran out into a road, and the only reason I didn't get hit by the car because the car suddenly changed direction because they just nearly missed their turn off. So we all have a guardian angel of sorts, but as much as we have guardian angels, we also have malicious spirits out there. Jinni, the jinn, if you're a Muslim at all. It's well talked about in the Quran, but it seems to be sort of sanitized and reduced and third-partied within the Christian Hebrew Bibles, because it's just the way it is, and there's a reason for that, but that's another video. The third time I nearly died was about 2 weeks after the second time, and I was in Panama at the time on an expedition which was called Operation Raleigh, and it was a charity had been set up for people to get an adventure in life. This is long before people took time out or a year out to go travelling. That didn't really exist except for the super rich, and of course they never talked about it because they keep it to themselves. But it was designed for someone who'd finished studying at college or whatever, and or was doing college, and you'd have about 3 months to go to somewhere else in the world in quite a hostile environment and participate in an adventure, a building project, an educational project, something useful. And I ended up in Panama for 3 months, which was a huge experience for which I was simply not prepared, but I learnt an awful lot from it. And one of the things I learnt was when you're outside of your comfort zone, and I mean completely outside of your comfort zone, things can get quite uncomfortable. And it's good that we know how to cope with uncomfortable situations as and when they arise. And the first rule of thumb is don't panic. The second rule is deal with it, just deal with it. And the third rule is if you can get support and assistance from your mates, call on it, because that's one reason we have mates. And while I was out in Panama, I was doing an archaeological dig on a site called Fort Snandru, which I won't go into at the moment, but it was basically a coral atoll, land-attached atoll, which a 17th century settlement had been located when a country in Europe attempted to set up a foreign colony. And it had been quite well selected, but unfortunately the Europeans who arrived there couldn't deal with the malaria or the heat or the humidity, But they learned how to deal with that by getting on with the locals, getting on with the indigenous people who are the Kuna Indians of the San Blas Islands and around that area. And there wasn't much of a dig to happen because the settlement had been temporary. There'd been very little building. It'd been really a construction, a camp construction for survival. That's what it was. But nevertheless, we had to do a methodical, organised archaeological dig. And this was after I'd been diving and nearly drowned in the Panama Canal and the Gatun Lakes 2 weeks earlier doing some marine archaeology. So there I was, land-based, thinking, this is great, we're in the tropical paradise, which isn't, it just isn't. Getting eaten by flies. The wet season was arriving, so it was getting really, really damp. We're starting to get fungal infections and everybody was just wanting to try and cool down. So I'm scraping away at the ground with a trowel, digging up bits of lead shot, leather, brass buckles, bits of pipe, basic boring stuff. And I thought, I've had enough of this. Here's me, everybody's gone off to do some fancier dig. I'm doing the basic dig. I'm away to have a look at the Caribbean. Because, I've not seen the Caribbean very often, got to make the most of it. So I walked the 100 yards, less than a minute, down to the sea and underneath the shades of the scrawny palm trees, which could barely get enough nutrition to survive out the coral, because it was so basically infertile. And you just had this sort of mulch really that it was horrible to dig actually, because it was lots of creepy crawlies in it, and every time they popped out, having disturbed them, they'd bite you or sting you, then fly away, as happens with insects. But I'm looking at this Caribbean, and it's so beautiful and blue, and the sun is shimmering in the water, and it looks so beautiful. And I kick off my flip-flops that I'm wearing, and I'm just about to step over that little coral step into the soft golden sand of the sea with the waves lapping against the coral, and it's very, very inviting. And I'm looking out at the view, and then suddenly I look down and there is a snake in the water. It's about 4 feet long and it's just hanging there in the water, gently undulating and wriggling a little bit. And I'm looking at that snake with its banded markings of burnt orange, soft burnt orange and rich cream coloured. Very beautiful looking creature, very nice, very attractive looking reptile, but deadly. And I was just about to step out into the water, and if I had, I'd have stood on it. And if I had stood on a snake would do what a snake would naturally do and retaliate and bite me. The thing about a Pacific sea snake, which is what it was, and they've migrated through the Panama Canal into the Caribbean. That's why it was on the East Coast and not in the Pacific. They've got soft fangs, these snakes. And people rarely die from them because divers are generally wearing neoprene wetsuits. And it's not just for comfort, it's also for protection from jellyfish, and gives you some slight protection from anemones. Not a lot, but it helps, definitely. But soft-fanged snakes can get through bare skin, no problem. If I'd been bitten, I'd have died. But died within about half an hour. Because there's no way, a first aid kit wouldn't help you there. I wouldn't have been able to get any swift, emergency services. We're too remote. So I'm looking at this situation and thinking, oh well, I won't be getting a paddle today. And it was so calm and matter of fact that it was surreal. There was no sense of panic or shock or trauma hang about. I've nearly died, I've been 5 seconds away from death. None of that. It was what it was. And we just get on with it, and I turned round and I walked back and I carried on digging a little bit, and within 5 minutes it's like it never had happened, unlike the fourth time. Now that was a whole different experience. Whew. In fact, it was such an intense experience that I've wrote about it in my latest book, going to be published in December, called, I think at the moment it's called Stories in a Whiskey Bar. And it was quite a few years late, it was about 4 years later. I'd taken up surfing and I was really enjoying it, even though I always had a terrible sense of balance and I didn't get the waves very often. You know, more often than not, I just liked sitting on the board between the land and the sea and the sky, just chilling out and having a good time and getting some exercise. Surfing's like that. It doesn't matter if you're not a great surfer, you can still enjoy it. But I was catching a few waves at that point, so I decided to go up to the Outer Hebrides for a holiday. And I put the surfboard in the back top of the car and I drove up, beautiful run, got the ferry over from Ullapool to Stornoway, and I was staying at a renovated traditional wooden thatched cottage on the west coast. Very, very spectacular, wonderful place to stay, called Gairnahan. And the moment I arrived, there was a storm rolling in, and I've looked at the waves, which were peeling very nicely, but a lot of white on top, a lot of foam getting generated by the wind. So you could see there was good form of waves and decent 6 to 8 footers, but they were getting chopped up by the approaching storm, particularly the wind. So that night there was a fierce storm. No problem, I was indoors, fire on, drinking whiskey. But the following day, suddenly it had gone completely calm and very misty, and the sea was totally flat, so no surfing. So I decided, well, I'm going to keep fit, so I'm going to go for a hill run, because when you're running on soft, spongy, mossy turf, it's really, really good, easy in your joints, and you won't get fresher air than on the Outer Hebrides and the coast, the west coast, because it's coming straight off the Atlantic from Greenland, really. And so I'm running up the hill, and it's misty, and it's wisps of mist, and it's very atmospheric, straight out of Lord of the Rings. And I'm running faster and slower, because you kind of pace, it helps you keep your breath a bit, particularly in the gradients. And I start running between the piles of stones that are called cairns, that are put on little points of land, the highest points, and I was using them as markers. And I ran from one to the other, feeling great, everything's fine. And then I was running to a large one that was definitely up the hill a little bit, and there's a big thick patch of mist in front of it, but it was quite clear at the top. And I'm running up this hill, and I'm running towards it, speeding up, getting drawn to it, and suddenly a voice inside says, "Just stop now. Just stop now." And I slowed down. I'm thinking, well, what the hell is this? I'm hearing voices here. And I slowed down, and suddenly I had a feeling of a hand just stopping me going forward. There's nothing there. So I slowed down to a walk. And as soon as I was walking and looking down, right, the wind rushed up the cliff face and blew away the mist that was covering the 150-foot sheer drop onto the rocks below. And I'm standing there, and something, some force, some power was trying to pull me over the edge of that cliff. I actually had to throw myself down on the ground. Now I'm about 2 feet away from the cliff edge, and dig my hands into the turf to just stop this force trying to pull me over the edge of the cliff. It was a jinn. It was a malicious, malevolent spirit. I could feel its presence, and I know it, and my guardian angel had stopped it happening. Now, this may seem surreal, a little bit cranky, a little bit eccentric. I'm only telling you what I experienced. That's all. You make of it what you will. I'm trembling, I'm crawling away from the cliff face. That cairn that I was heading towards was actually on a sheer rock stack, a narrow rock stack, like a pillar of rock, that was 30 yards out into the ocean. And I couldn't see it because of this thick mist. by the time I got 50 yards away from the cliff, I just sat down. I was lying there for about 20 minutes, dizzy and trembling violently. It was nothing like the third time that I'd nearly died, which was just casual, natural experience. This was a whole different level. And even now, I found it very easy to write about in my book because the memory is so vivid. And I got myself up after about 20 minutes and still shaking, my heart still pounding. I'm walking inland deliberately. And I could still feel a malicious presence following me as if seeking an opportunity to get at me. And that's what made, and I'm glad I had that experience, because once you've felt something, you know its identity, even if it's invisible. And it's happened since then, but I've been a lot stronger and a lot better prepared. And I've been able to far better resist it and even start to fight back. Later that day, I was sitting in a coffee shop, and the wee old lady in the table next to me, eating her scone and drinking her tea, she looked across and she went, "Hello." I said, "Hello, how are you doing?" "That's fine." She says, "I'm just a visitor here, but I can see you've had a bad experience today." And I'm thinking, what the hell? Yes, I have had a bad experience. I explained what happened, and she said, yeah. But you've come through that, and it's not going to happen again for a long time. How do you explain that? And by the way, this was just a sweet, gentle, unassuming little old lady. There was no bad vibes, no negatives from her whatsoever. It's just as if she was seeing things that normal people don't. They're called seers. They have a very, very strong cultural presence in Northern European history. It's a form of shamanism, and the seers, folk with second sight, are basically instinctively in tune with a higher sensory range that is beyond most people. And we live in a society where our range of senses is being continually dumbed down for control. But I'll leave it at that now. I think this video's gone on quite long enough. I don't want it to be too protracted. But there you are, gainers. This is my experience of the third and the fourth time that I nearly died. And there is a fifth and a sixth. Hey. I've not lived my life wrapped in cotton wool. And I'll talk about that in maybe in a few months' time. But thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this, likey, belly, pushy, clicky, subscribey, etc. And we'll see you soon. I'm going to leave you with this nice countryside view here. We're in a country lane. That's what we are in. And I'm hanging over the fence, shooting the breeze with you. That's what it is, shooting the breeze. But I think I'll leave the scenery here to have the final final contribution to this video. Thanks for watching. Hey, and you take care of yourself. Life ain't a dress rehearsal. Life's what happens when we're busy making other plans. I think it was John Lennon that said that.